Both those people in the room and those people watching online to the second of the Cambridge Climate Lecture Series. We very much enjoyed last week's lecture from Bryony Worthington talking about the policy landscape, and it's our great pleasure to be able to welcome today Anthony Hobley. Anthony is a very important figure in the climate advocacy space. He started off life as a scientist. He did his undergraduate studies in physics and chemistry and even made his way here to Darwin College to start a PhD in chemistry before seeing a more lucrative path, I suspect, towards a career as a lawyer, where he worked in corporate law, focusing on environmental issues for many years, ending up as a partner at the law firm Norton Rose Fulbright. He was involved in a number of the emissions trading schemes, setting those up, and spent time in Australia working and gaining significant insight into both the legal positions but also the policy environment in Australia. But more recently he's joined an organisation called Carbon Tracker as their CEO. Carbon Tracker is particularly well known for the seminal work it did around the carbon bubble. And for those who are not familiar, this was really important work that brought to light what might have otherwise been a rather interesting but perhaps obscure scientific finding, that the temperature that will ultimately be accumulated is directly related to the cumulative amount of carbon that's emitted over time. And the work that Carbon Tracker did was then put a value on that, and therefore I was able to talk about the amount of carbon that was already proven to exist in the ground in terms of fossil fuels, but could not be burnt if we were to stay below certain temperature thresholds. And that really had an important role in moving the whole debate, something that might otherwise, as I say, have remained a rather obscure but interesting scientific finding suddenly took on an important policy role. It was very important. And subsequent work that Carbon Tracker has done around stranded assets, and more recently looking at the viability of certain fossil fuel companies, things that I'm sure that Anthony's going to talk about today. Now, this lecture series, in part, this year, we're remembering our dear colleague David Mackay, who sadly passed away this time last year. And actually, this sort of simple, back-of-the-envelope but robust analysis that sheds great light into the scale of the problem is exactly the sort of thing that David would have been very much advocating for. So it's very fitting that this lecture follows in that footsteps. Now, I know that one of the things that Anthony sometimes uses as an expression to describe what Carbon Tracker does is that they're like climate advocates in pinstripe suits. So I'm a bit disappointed to see he's not wearing a pinstripe suit today.
I did have one.
But nevertheless, it's a great pleasure to introduce Anthony to talk to you about the financial side of carbon.
Well, thank you very much, and it's wonderful to be here. And I think this whole idea, this Cambridge Climate Lecture Series, is a wonderful idea, and the fact that it's being streamed and people around the world have access to this is pure genius. So I think that's very important to acknowledge. And these types of lectures can impact people's entire careers, because yes, it's true, I was here. I probably shouldn't mention that there was a time when I was actually chased out of Trinity College by the porters because we tried to gate crash the Freshers' Ball, I think in October 1988. Anyway, hopefully they've forgotten by now. But it was a lecture like this, or a series of lectures like this, that on the environment, and I remember one of the early lectures around modelling climate change that was probably instrumental in me deciding I didn't actually want to be a research scientist. I think my PhD was something to do with trying to understand why soap bars went mushy when left in the water on the sink, and didn't really inspire me. But this whole idea of climate change really did. And it's true, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, but I never actually wanted to be just a lawyer. I only ever wanted to be an environment lawyer, and I was lucky enough to pursue that career. And you know, it was Cambridge and a lecture on the environment, and particularly on climate change, that was one of the key influences, if you like, in my whole career since then. So yes, and I mean, thank you to Cambridge, because it's been a very exciting career and very sort of, hopefully, we're having some impact.